it wasn't a little girl. I was camping in New Mexico with my husband's family near a deserted lake. We were a group of about 10 plus 6 more people who were camping nearby. After dark, we were enjoying the traditions of camping, sipping beers, roasting s'mores, and swapping ghost stories when all of a sudden we heard eerie cries for help that clearly belonged to a terrified child. However, neither group had any children with them. We decided to investigate the source of the haunting noises together. There was a field behind our campsites, and a terrifying image awaited us. A ghostly figure, completely white and very tall, standing roughly 100 feet away from us. At least 6 feet in height, it had an unsettlingly skeletal figure. The atmosphere became increasingly eerie as we keep hearing the cries for help of a little girl lingered in the darkness as we tried to sleep.
The Walking Dead. I'm a psychiatric nurse, and early in my career, I worked at a residential mental health facility. One of our residents was an elective mute, which means that he couldn't talk, but there were no medical reasons as to why. He had spoken earlier in his life, and in fact seemed quite normal back then, with the exception of being close to 7 feet tall. He'd been raised in the Deep South and joined the military when he was 19, but one night he vanished. He was declared old, and eventually he was declared missing and dead. 10 years later, a 7-foot-tall man walked into a VI hospital emergency room in my part of the Midwest and said to the receptionist, "My name is Marion Duchesne, not the real name, and I've been dead for 10 years. Those were the last words he ever spoke. He was covered with dust, and he was wearing the same clothes he'd been reported to be wearing the night he vanished. His social security number had not been used, and he had no identification on his person. However, they were able to identify him, I guess via fingerprints. The family was notified, but they said they had already grieved their lost man, and that whomever was claiming to be him simply could not be. They demanded not to be contacted again." Marion paced all day every day, moving his mouth that looked like talking or muttering, but no sound came out. He had an unnerving habit of throwing his head back with his mouth wide open, as if he were laughing heartily, but not even a breath could be heard. If I talked to him, he appeared to listen, periodically throwing his head back in that laughter-mimicking way of his. Various medications were tried, but they did not affect him either positively or negatively. Occupational therapy did nothing because Marion would just grin, and unless told to stay put, he'd get up and start pacing again. On my last day at that job, the last thing I saw was Marion pacing in the parking lot, throwing his head back to laugh. Later, I wondered if all along I'd been dealing with a ghost. All these years later, I still don't know.
The unrest stopped. I was driving across country with my mom and sister when I was 16 and my sister was 20. It was late, but we were well rested still and alert. We were driving along an interstate and needed gas and a bathroom break, so we stopped at the only rest stop in 200 miles. There was a van full of teenagers on a road trip at the gas station, as well as a small gray car parked at the pump in front of us with 2 young men standing still outside of it. When we got there, everything felt wrong. We'd been on the road for days and seen many rest stops at night and had never been afraid until then. My mom and sister went inside and I stayed in the car. I heard the teenagers say they were creeped out and couldn't get the pump to work, and they left in a hurry. I was watching the car in front of us, and the 2 men had not moved at all. Not an inch. They weren't talking. They weren't on phones. They were just standing there, still as stone. My sister and mom came running back out to the car, and when they got in, the 2 men slowly turned to look at us while not moving or pivoting the rest of their bodies. And I swear to fucking shit, we all saw the same thing. They had eyes dark as pitch and empty. Truly empty. Not black, not reflecting any light at all, just a void. We sped out of there and didn't stop until we were in the next city. The worst thing about the entire experience? We couldn't find the place on any map. We knew exactly which spot on the interstate to look, and we couldn't find it on Google Maps or any paper map we had. We even asked locals about the creepy gas station out on that stretch of road and got only confused looks. We've traveled on that interstate since, and there is no rest stop.
dancing footsteps. Every time I stay at my grandma's house, I hear someone walking upstairs. It starts at one side of the room, casually walks to the other, and stops. This will happen maybe twice a night. I didn't start hearing it until I was about 14, when my grandparents made me start sleeping in a different room on the first floor because they started sleeping in separate bedrooms. Both of their rooms are also on the first floor. For a little backstory, I have always been afraid of the upstairs at their house. I don't know why, but it always freaked me out. There's one room specifically, though. It's a long, narrow bedroom. When you open the door, there are closets on your left and right, a bed placed roughly in the middle of the room, and a window on the far side opposite the door. I was told growing up by my grandparents that the sons of the previous owner claimed to see a gorilla come out of the closet at night, dance around the room, and go back into the closet. I thought nothing of this story until I had to start sleeping in the other room, the room located directly below the scary room upstairs. So we all go to bed. All the lights in the house are off and I'm still awake, lying on the bed. Then I heard it. Thump. 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 Starting at one end of the room upstairs. It got closer to me, passed right above me, and continued to the end of the room, where it stopped. I'm wide awake, terrified out of my mind. It was no question to me that I had heard footsteps. I knew that slow, casual pace. I was freaked out and went to my grandpa's room. I told him what I heard. He told me that the house is old and it creaks, but he turned the dining room light on for me, so I felt a little safer. I tried going back to sleep. Then it started again, this time from where it ended the first time, by the window upstairs. It walks over me again and stops when it reached the door. I thought it was over until 5 seconds later when I heard it coming down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Silence as it reached the landing. Then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And silence again as it reached the first floor. I was frozen in shock. Whatever it was on my floor of the house, and sadly unaffected by the dining room light. I was staring at the doorway to my room. The dining room light was shining in, and my vision began to distort. I felt dizzy with fear, so I pulled the blankets over my head and suddenly heard a scratching sound from inside my room. I knew exactly where it was coming from, my grandpa's gun case. It was a very obvious sound, scratching on the wood, long scratches down the front of the gun case door. I could even hear the door ever so slightly tapping against the frame as each scratch began. I tried to scream and I couldn't. I took a second to take a deep breath and let out a loud scream. In seconds, my grandpa had made it to my room, and I was relieved. Needless to say, he still didn't believe me. So I did what any normal person would do. I draped a sheet over the side of the bed and slept underneath it. I wrapped myself tight in a comforter, put on headphones, and turned my back to the door. There could be a party of ghosts in my room and I wouldn't even know. The next morning, my grandpa told my grandma about what happened the night before. She said, "Oh, that's silly. You know, your cousin woke me up the last time she stayed here. She came in my room saying I hear footsteps. I slept under the bed for the rest of my week. Stay with them. I've stayed there countless times since that happened, and I hear the footsteps every time. I sleep on top of the bed now, but keep my back to the door and sleep with headphones on. I haven't heard it come down the stairs since that first night, but if it does, I don't want to know."